I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote this morning. Everything that we're doing today is going to be either here or on the other side of that partition wall. If you are interested in any sessions that are in room 230 something, it's just one more hallway down, so everything is kind of collective here. We're really excited to be able to listen and communicate and work together to try to move this approach forward in the state of Montana, and we thank you for joining us and taking that task on with us. So our speaker today, I hope you are ready. She is going to light up this room with energy, enthusiasm, and challenges. Every time we talk with Marie, she challenges us in a great way to do better and to do more for our students, so I'm excited to hear what she does on a statewide level. Marie Alcock is an educational consultant, speaker, author who specializes in the field of curriculum, instruction, and assessment. She's worked with schools and organizations all over the country, including in the state of Montana, and internationally, and working to implement best practices in education. She's the president of Learning Systems Associates, a consulting group that supports schools and districts as they transition to contemporary learning models, and is the founder of Tomorrow's Education Network, a nonprofit dedicated to promoting student literacy. So it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome to the stage Dr. Marie Alcock.
Okay. Am I able to take this off or no? I don't think I can. Oh, y'all get to see me tethered. Okay, that's going to be fun. Good morning, everyone. It's my honor and my pleasure to be here with you today. I always enjoy coming to Montana, and I also appreciate that there's some familiar faces in the audience, people who've been working with me for the past week, and in fact for the several years on this work. So for those of you who are new to this conversation or kind of just coming into it, I would encourage you to branch out and network at events like this, because there are colleagues of yours who are deep in this work. In fact, I'm going to share some of the work that they've been doing, and so that is a wonderful opportunity that has been granted to us through MSU, and so thank you for that. Can I see, just with a show of hands, how many of you have been working in the area of proficiency-based or competency-based or standards-based work? Excellent. Can I see who's brand new to the conversation? We welcome you. Those of you who've been doing it, could you please look them in the eye and tell them everything's going to be okay? Everything's going to be okay. We got this. We're a bunch of adults. We can educate children. So it's just about a mind shift. So today's keynote is really going to be about the idea of why. Why on earth would I do proficiency-based anything or competency-based anything? As we learned from Karen Hess last night, those two words are very synonymous. And then standards-based practices, which is one of the tools we can use to get to proficiency-based learning. Okay? So we're going to dive on in. Let's see what happens. Okay. So are you all familiar with Bloom? Right, Bloom's taxonomy and that whole game. Well, when Bloom was educating his pre-service teachers, he would ask a question. It was always the same question. What is your purpose as an educator? Fundamentally, is it to find talent among the students, identify it, and anoint it with a meaningful A? Or is our purpose to develop talent in every young learner who we meet, which means we find where they are, and we have the skill set to develop their skills and help them progress. What is our purpose? And if you and I can answer that, then you're going to be able to make the decisions you need to make to create the most effective, most efficient, and most healthy learning environment for human beings. And that's our goal. We want to be the most effective, most efficient, and the healthiest learning environment. However, we have a challenge in front of us, because we used to have a proficiency-based education system. Our agricultural system, I'm going way back. Join me on this one. I'm going to like Little House on the Prairie and the Waltons. You with me on this? No, okay, right? So when the Little House on the Prairie characters would go to school, it was a single room. They were not grouped by age. Kids showed up whenever they want to. You with me on this? And when they went to school, they didn't get an A or a B or a C or a D. They got what were called marks. High marks meant you were performing at the high level of those skills. That's what high marks meant, not 100-point scale. High marks meant you're showing proficiency in the skills you need. Now, at that time in American education, there were really only 3 goals of American education: literacy, mathematics, because of the economy, and civics. We were a representational government. Sorry, science didn't come in until Sputnik came in and scared the bejesus out of us. Okay? And it wasn't until 1890 that we ended up going, we need a new education system. We need to train kids to be able to deal with industry. You know what the most important part was? Getting kids to get to school on time. Because prior to that, 2 different cities could have 2 totally different times. It could be 4 o'clock in Billings, and it could be 2 o'clock in Bozeman. The only thing that united even time were trains. So kids just kind of wandered into school whenever they wanted. So in 1890, we were like, ooh, you know what? Why don't we force the kids to all show up at time, get them to march in lines, make them move from class to class, let's have bells that go off to get them ready for industry. And the other purpose was to sort children, to find the talent, the A's, the B's, from the C, D, F. That was management from labor. Our job was to sort kids. So now, in the information age, our job is shifting again. And our job is no longer to sort kids, management from labor. Our job is to educate every single child in the most effective, efficient, and healthy learning environment possible. And that's what Bloom was getting at. That's what Bloom wanted to challenge us with our thinking. So, you and I now are meeting together 100 years after the 1890s and going, so why are we doing proficiency-based grading and reporting practices of any kind? So here are the 3 reasons. Give me a thumbs up when you're done reading. I'm really looking for thumbs. This is interactive. I can see you. Okay, so here we go. The first one is all about this feedback and the quality of that feedback. Now, Karen Hess last night told us feedback was important. So now we need to talk about being effective with our feedback. The second reason is all about relevant and authentic experiences. Okay, Karen Hess talked to us about that too. She talked about project-based learning, problem-based learning, and phenomenon-based learning. Apparently all the really cool ones begin with the letter P. Who knew? But the idea here becomes, I also need more time. So this is more efficient. The last reason is that you and I need some sort of structure or model to actually teach our children how to be self-navigating. Our current information world requires children to be professional learners. So that means we actually have to teach the kids how to be professional learners. And to do that, I can't keep them in the obey state and sort them. Let's take a deeper look in each one. I'd like to go into the honest and transparent feedback. You ready? Turn to your colleague, make sure they're in the toward state. If they haven't had enough coffee, nudge them a little bit. All right, here we go. To do this, we got to talk about grading and report cards. By the way, this is my least favorite topic because it's the least important thing we do. Okay? But let's just talk about it for 1 second. We got two problems. We totally don't agree on the purpose of the report card, and we don't agree on what counts. Let's take a look. Problem number one. When we survey parents and society and teachers and administrators, they tell us these are the basic reasons why we have a report card. Now, I would ask you to prioritize them. Which one is the most important and which one is the least important? And you don't get to pick more than one. No ties. Give me a thumbs up when you have an idea in your head. In general, when we survey groups, people agree that numbers 1 and 2 tend to be prioritized as the most important reason for a report card, and reasons number 4 and 5 tend to be identified as the less important reasons. Here's my point. I don't care. I don't care which reasons you pick in your community. All I care about is you don't try to do all 5. If you try to do all 5 of these reasons, you will sabotage the effectiveness of your report card. I suggest that most report cards right now are fairly useless. I thank you. And so what I suggest is that if you're going to have a report card, because our society is making us do that for compliance, pick a reason, communicate that reason clearly to everyone involved, and then only allow the report card to be that reason. And use all the other effective tools at your disposal to achieve the others. But if you try to make your report card be too many of those purposes, we are ineffective. But order now and I will double your order. Because we got 2 problems. Problem number 2, we totally don't agree on what should count. So I got a list of 13 items here. Take a look. I'm not asking you to name the items. I just want to know how many of these items you would want to count in a student's report card grade. Is it 1, 3, 5, 8, 10, more than 12? How many should count? Now, if I weren't tethered, I'd totally be walking around and like asking you to write this down. I totally would. You know that. Actually, I can't even get like across the stage. Everyone who knows me, can you like have compassion for how hard this is for me? I can't even believe I can keep a straight thought. Okay, let's see if I can keep it up. Here we go. All right, you got your answers? Let's go. In our research, when we survey thousands of different people, this is what we get. And except for the fact that no one says 4, we are all over the place on this. We got nothing. So you and I could do 3 years of professional development to try and get everyone to have the exact same accurate, consistent, meaningful grades, and we would fail. We are all over the place. So the pursuit of honest and transparent feedback from this kind of grading system It's not going to happen. Let's keep going. So what does the research tell us? The research tells us, since the 1970s, 2 truths. Number 1, apparently children can learn without grading. Who knew? They can ride a bike and they never got an A or a B or a C. It was amazing. Rule number 2 on that one. Teachers, believe it or not, can teach without grading. So grading is the least impactful element of what we do in our classroom. Your curriculum is important. Your instructional choices are important. Your assessments are important. Your grading, not so much. So do not let grading or report cards make any of your decisions about your curriculum, your instruction, or your assessment. Let me say that again. Do not let a report card design in any way, shape, or form control or impact your curricular decisions, your instructional decisions, or your assessment decisions. I'm not proud. I'll beg. Next. Apparently, grading should never be done on a curve. Do you remember the curve? Yeah. That is utterly a sorting technique. Now I say that, and everyone goes, oh yeah, I don't want my heart surgeon to get 50% of the material right and be top of his class. Right, that was the easy one. But what about this one, which is a little more difficult? When I was teaching in North Carolina, I was teaching at year-round school, so if you have any questions about that, happy to talk about it. But I was teaching there, and I had 2,000 8th graders. Just own that for a second. So when I gave an assignment, exactly who did I punish? I taught 6 classes a day. My smallest one was 47 8th graders. Do you know what that smells like? So when I gave an assignment, and they would turn in all their papers, and I would go home, that weekend's shot. Everyone's with me on this? So I get home, and I dress down for the comfort. And I'm like, which one should I read first? All right, I'll read Henry's and Rebecca's, because they're my top students. And if they had a problem, then I know there was something wrong with the assignment. How's that for a check? So there's kind of like my general A. And then I build up the strength and the willpower, and I read Ingrid's and Patrick's. Because that's going to be my low end. They always struggle. That'll be maybe my C. And then I start reading all the other papers, and I get used to them, and I start filling them in. I'll get some outliers that surprise me. What did I just do? Totally sorted, and I graded on a curve. That is a total curve. And why am I doing that? Because let's say I have a teacher. I'll prove this to you that society's got this a little wrapped around, and we need to talk about this more. I'm sorry, what's your first name? Denise. Denise. And over there's the nephew. No, here's Denise. Denise. That's New York, I'm sorry. Denise has taught her children, and all of her students get an A. What does society think? What does my principal say? Too easy. Grade inflation, because someone has to get a B. That is the call that we are sorting children, not educating them. I'll say it, that's the only thing you take from this keynote. We win. So Denise, how come the thought isn't, Denise is an amazing teacher. I want to see her on the Today Show. Give me any 30 kids, watch what I can do. Look at the attitude. This is what we need in our profession. Not the victim card, not the this is too hard, but teachers like Denise. See, I made up for it, right? Right? I'm working on it. Okay, in that space, we have to challenge our assumptions about how we're approaching grading. And so I put that as a curve, and we need to be having conversations about it. However, feedback is essential. Grading is not, feedback is. And not just the autopsy summative at the end. I want diagnosis and prescription while my child is still alive and can actually improve their performance. Too much energy for this early in the morning? I'll tone it down. Okay, we're good. So feedback, so that means you and I need a feedback design. Death to the end of the unit test. That is too late for the child to actually improve their performance. The only reason for an end of unit test is sorting. So, what does this mean for us? This means we need to think about grades differently. Proficiency-based grades talk about product, that's your academic standard, process, that's how the student is approaching and experiencing the learning, and then progress, how much learning they've had over time. So, let's talk about the story of the bee. Let's pretend these are my 4 students. And these are my 4 students. I'm a high school science teacher. Everyone with me on that? Okay, good. So my first student got a B. My second student gets a B. My third student gets a B. And my fourth student gets a B. B, 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 B. But what does it mean? Effective grades need to be accurate, consistent, meaningful, and actually promote learning. Someone at the table should probably write that down. It needs to be accurate, consistent, meaningful, and supportive of learning. So let's look at my first student. When she came into class, she did most of her work. She was a really good student. She got about 80% of the standards in the beginning. By the end, she could do about 85% of the standards. This will be the last time you ever hear me say percents. Now, for a lack of a better term, she was my invisible student. My second student, she was, she was the kid who struggled right in the beginning. You know that kid that bombs that first test because they don't know how you actually assess? Because they haven't learned how to get an A from you and how to get an A from you? Okay, so she bombed it. Seriously, like a 30%. You with me on this? And she was just a mess. She was a hot mess. But I moved her seat. You know how we do that? Moved her seat, started to work with her, and by the end of the learning experience, she was able to do 100% of the standards. But because we average grades to penalize children who take longer to learn, hear me on that, we average grades to penalize the learning process, I gave her a B. My third student, he could do 100% of the standards on day 1. And he knew it. He was disruptive, disrespectful. I think she would have been doing better on her classes if she hadn't been sitting next to him in the beginning of the year. Didn't do an ounce of my homework, challenged my homework policies, but he would waltz in and get 100% on the assessment. I can only get him 10% of the grade. B. Whose parents are going to be writing me a letter? My fourth student, you would love her. Now, you got to understand, she came in, she probably was only able to do about maybe 59, 60, 61% of the standards. But you never saw a better student ambassador. She worked hard. She came to extra help sessions I didn't even offer. She was in that classroom. She cleaned my classroom, organized my shelves. She was the best diplomatic ambassador in my classroom, and she even gave study tips to my second student. And by the end, she started off 2 grade levels behind. She closed an entire grade level. And she was only able to do like 78% of the standards. But I gave her the B. B, 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 B. This is not accurate. It's not consistent. It's not meaningful. And colleges and employers are tired of being lied to. They want to be able to pick which one of these students is an accurate fit to their needs. Some need them to know all the science standards. Some need them to be hard workers who show up every day. We don't give honest and transparent feedback. So let's look at these grades now with product, process, and progress. My first student is a BBB. It was about 80%. She did most of her work, and she didn't stand out one way or the other in terms of growth. But look at my second student. My second student was an A on her standards at the end, 100%. It doesn't matter that she got a 30% earlier. No penalty for taking time to learn. What about her process? She was a hot mess in the beginning, but by the end, it's an A. And look at her progress. Look at my second student. Remember him? He was an A for science. I can't take that away from him. But now look at the conversation I can have with his parents. I can say, yeah, science, he's got it. But now we need to talk about his ability to collaborate, his ability to follow leadership, his ability to have a positive attitude in a work environment. And if you value punctuality, turning things in, then grade it. Don't minimalize it to being only 10% of a grade. Give it validity. And my last student, it's a C. I can't give her the B. But look what I can say. A about process, A about progress. How are we doing? You with me on this? Okay. So this is what we mean by honest and transparent. But now I work with a lot of colleagues who say, well, that's okay. I'll do the 100-point scale, and I'll just convert it. So now you are about to learn what's called the 100-point scale trap. All right, to do this, you and I need to talk about a proficiency scale for a second. Can we do that? Okay. Can we just agree that a 3.0 item represents a task or an assessment item that requires the entire standard? Okay? And a 4.0 task is one that requires anything above the standard. And a 2.0 item is something that requires only part of the standard or a prerequisite of the standard. Can we agree on this? Check at your table. If there's anyone dissenting, point at them. All right, we're good. All right, let's do this. So now, I have two teachers. Sorry, I picked on Denise before. Now I have these two teachers. Hi, two teachers. Okay, I have two teachers. What's your first name? Trish and Esty. Beautiful. Trish and Esty. Okay. Trish is like, you know me. Here we go. Trish and Esty. So they're trying to figure out, is my son Colin at standard, above standard, or below standard? So teacher A, Trish, says, well, Colin is getting 100% on all his tests. She's starting to write me notes about, have you thought about maybe a GT test? Or have you thought about maybe he could be taking on some enrichment programs? Which, by the way, I hate. Does that imply the rest of my curriculum is stale and boring? All right, but I digress. That's so the next session. So Trish says he's getting 100% on all the tests. Now, Trish is teaching one set of standards, but Esty is also teaching the exact same standards, funny enough. And she's saying, oh my gosh, Colin is getting 50s on all my tests. She's starting to write me notes saying things like, is everything okay at home? How's he doing? Have you thought about maybe some extra help sessions? She's very concerned. She's about to say he's below standard. The 100-point scale has pointed to this very clearly. Except now let's look at the assessment items. If I actually look at Trish's assessment items, if all of the items on her assessment are 2.0 items, my son is getting 100% on parts of the standard. But on Esty's tests, Her items are all 3.0 items and 4.0 items. My son is getting the 3.0 items correct and the 4.0 items incorrect. So the data actually says my son is successful on a 3.0 item. That's requiring the entire standard. So my son is at standard. Both teachers were about to put on a legal document. By the way, a report card is a legal document and subpoenable. They were about to put on a legal document the wrong information. So the 100-point scale cannot inform you accurately as to where the student is. Now, in this particular story, just by the way, never on a legal document say a child is below standard. You would have to prove that. Say you have no evidence of success at this time. But that child might be a savant in that material and show up in a courtroom and they just won't do the standard for you. All right, there we go. Was that too much? We're good. So let's take a look at proficiency scales for a second. Proficiency scales, a la old school Marzano, are not rubrics. I know that many of them that are coming out now look more and more like rubrics. And that's to really help people adjust to them, but they are not. Proficiency scales define the conditions of success, meaning this task was with help, or this task is the entire standard and only the standard. If it's an instructional event and I'm telling the student what to do, that's an obey event. The reason why this is so important is the clarity at the low end of the scale. If a child cannot be successful on a 0.0 item, hear me on this, you have to earn that 0. To be clear, to get a 0, you have to have had success. To get on the scale, you have to have had success. Try explaining that one to the parents just on the first year. Okay, but a proficiency scale defines the conditions of the success. So a 0.0 event is instruction. So now I told the child to copy my work into their notes. What is the difference? What is the prescription? What does a child need if they were unsuccessful on a 0.0 event? Well, that child might be in a social emotional situation. They might be in a crisis. They need an intervention now. Or they're in a cognitive processing situation. We are way above their head. I don't know what a child needs who's getting a 30 on the 100-point scale versus a 50. The 100-point scale is punitive in the lower 50 points. I don't know, they're just failing. What does the child who's getting a 5 need that's different from the child who's getting a 15? And that's 10 points. Yet we think we know the difference between a child who's getting a 90 and the child who's getting an 80. That's just 10 points. I lack the clarity at the lower end of the scale. A proficiency scale this way has intense clarity at the lower end of the scale. The difference between a 0.0 and a 1.0, a 0.0 is successful on the task in the obey state. So all they need are more minutes of instruction because the 1.0 is guided practice. The difference between the 1.0 and a 2.0 is independence. So a child who can succeed in guided practice just needs more minutes on task to get stronger at the 2.0 item. You see what I'm saying here? This is the clarity children deserve for a healthy learning environment. Every item you ever give a child should be diagnosable and produce a prescription at this level of clarity. These are just some notes for you to continue to work on that and some examples of what it might look like in a classroom. This also means that everything you do in your classroom aligns to the P scale. Imagine this, an I do, we do, you do lesson. I do would be the 0.0 evidence, the we do would be the 1.0 evidence, and the you do is the 2.0 evidence, which means in one mini lesson I could get 3 levels of evidence. Now there's a rumor out there that some people say, hey, we should just go to 3.0. I don't want to do 4.0. We know who you are. Can I talk about that a little bit? Standards are minimum expectations. So if you don't go to 4.0, you're telling me that my child is in a minimum school district. And I got questions. 4.0 is the whole reason we're doing this. You're just making sure we don't have any gaps. I just want to show you this. This is what it might look like on a report card. My point in showing you this is that a proficiency scale on a report card, I remind you, a report card is a learning document. I'm sorry, legal document. Wow, right? Imagine if it was a learning document. That would be so cool. It's a legal document. Look at the conversation difference with parents when my language looks like that. Never say the child is below standard. But you can say they're above standard, and we can and should teach to that level, and we can and should get evidence at that level. Which brings me to the second reason we're doing this. Dun, da, da, da. Seriously, we need more time. Has to be efficient. And number two, our children deserve relevant and authentic learning experiences. So here's my challenge to you. Every curriculum unit. How many of you have a curriculum unit? How many of you actually have a curriculum? There we go. Here's my challenge. Every unit of curriculum that you and I teach should inspire in a child either personal joy, not fun. I mean, I'm not anti-fun, don't get me wrong. Joy. Or a career that they can actually make money in within 6 months of your unit. Yes, kindergarten, I'm talking to you. Or actually make the world a better place. If our units of curriculum are not hitting this, joy, a career, or actually making the world a better place, it could be better. It could be stronger. And we should be looking at it. Because if you and I are doing it out of compliance, I have a suspicion as to why the students aren't motivated. So you and I are now talking about deliverables. Check this out. I mean real presentations to real audiences, real proposals, flip decks, pitch decks. I'm talking about products and prototypes. Look, check out those two young girls in the middle picture. Can you see them? Can I talk about them for a second? So these two young girls represent a unit that has been growing over time. So the first time it was like the personal narrative. Guys, if you keep making kids write personal narratives, I have a question as to why we have a ton of little narcissists. See, that was better than the Denise, right? That was good. Do you forgive me yet? I'll get better. The idea becomes, in this situation, they were told to write a narrative, a story, a fantasy story. They really learned about narrative elements. And so what they did was they actually got to read those stories in local retirement living homes to a real audience who then gave them feedback on their work. Which characters were engaging, which characters needed more development. That was a pretty good year. But wait, order now, we'll double your order. Scooby-Doo ending. The next year, when they had the narrative, what they did was they went and interviewed octogenarians, anyone over the age of 80. And the teacher had let them record the videos, the interviews. And then the children wrote their stories. How do you think that made the octogenarians feel? How do you think that made the children feel? Then the students published and began routinely publishing with their local historical societies the untold stories. And that's called making the world a better place. Or don't do it. Another way to get to this relevant and authentic piece is to think, gosh, what do people get paid to do in this subject area? Very few mathematicians get paid to solve problems that someone else in the room has an answer key to. Very few. And the test is not the be-all, end-all of where we're going. So, what are the top 20 paying jobs for writers? What are the top 20 paying jobs for listeners? There's a rhythm to this. Sing along if you know the chorus. What are the top 20 jobs for social scientists? What are the top 20 paying jobs for the speakers? Oh man. All right, here's a giant list. Please don't try to read it. You have access to all my slides. But here's what I do want you to do. Pick one that you feel you could take back to your environment, just one of those, and upgrade an assessment, because then the whole unit becomes more meaningful, more impactful, and more transferable, which is what Karen Hess was talking about. Most of what we do is drill and practice and what I'm going to call rehearsal. But you and I are challenged to get to authentic performances and reflection. And those authentic performances, the purpose is motivation, not a grade. How long do you think a child will kick a soccer ball to practice without losing their motivation? If I say, 10 years from now, little Billy, you might get to play a game. But we do that with our mathematics. We do that with our writing. We keep making them write prompts that we picked. Not what a professional writer does, or get published, or be impactful. We keep making them regurgitate history. I dedicate that to you, my friend. But we don't let them be historians where they're writing untold stories. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a, I think we should add it on. It's a, if you don't, public education is going to go out of business. And we do have enough time. You and I have the same amount of time that Leonardo da Vinci had every day. I suggest we're not using our time the most efficient way. And if you and I are still trying to cover the curriculum and drag the children through something I'm sorting them through while also trying to develop the talents in every single child, then yeah, I understand why you're feeling overwhelmed. Because you have two opposite job descriptions and it's causing a problem. So, there are leaders in our field. Last night, Karen Hess mentioned the late Grant Wiggins. But there are people who have been teaching us about these ideas for years. And at times back in the, that was like 1992 to 2002, right? It was like Jay McTighe would come up on stage and be like, you can't have all those standards in a unit. We must have, and they have like really cool words like worthy, meaningful units of curriculum, right? But then you would have Bob Marzano and Tom Gutsky would be over there going, but you need to make sure you don't have gaps. So we need to have standards and bundles of standards. It's not an either-or situation. What you and I are now dealing with is a methodology to do both. They actually help each other happen. If I do the standards or proficiencies in an efficient way with diagnosis and prescription, I actually have enough time for worthy, awesome units of curriculum, which gives us a three-part learning design. I need foundational learning targets that come from standards or proficiencies. I need contextual learning targets that come from a curriculum. Your case study, theme, issue, topic. Do I have any English teachers in the room? Represent. Where are you? Okay, give me one book you read. Sure. Fire and Brimstone. If the teacher picks that as a mentor text, it's a case study. Everyone with me on that? Nowhere in the standards did it say, we must read Fire and Brimstone. So that's a contextual learning target. Everything that I'm learning about that I'm learning about character in this book. So foundational learning targets should be about 50% of your instructional time. See my little markers at the bottom? Okay. Contextual learning targets should be about 30% of the instructional time. And that leaves enough room in the curriculum for the children. 20% of that learning time, instructional time, should be student co-created learning experiences and learning targets. So you and I could say this is the story of a learning target. But there are 3 different kinds of learning targets. If we design our curriculums like this, they will not be oversaturated. Teachers will calm down and feel more in control of what they're doing because the non-negotiable is clear. I have teachers trying to cover programs. Do you know how much stress that is for them? Because they know they can't. So you're going to leave all that pressure about, I might leave a gap on their shoulders? I think that's abusive. You and I need to create year-long contexts where we bundle the standards, or proficiencies, and we make it super clear what the non-negotiables are, and everything in the program that sticks to that becomes non-negotiable. And everything else is negotiable. That leaves enough room for the identity of your school, the identity of your community, the identity of your teachers to pick contextual learning targets. Case studies, themes, issues, topics, and challenges that make sense for your students. But that's just a teacher-picked one. What if the kids hated it? Do any of your students sort of not like that book? It could happen. I mean, obviously not in his school, but it could happen. So when I open it up and say, well, then show me some characters that develop over the course of a text that you like, that's a student co-created learning target. So I think these are 2 great tastes that taste great together. I want some standards, that's my chocolate, and I want some self-navigation and some relevant and authentic learning experiences, that's going to be my peanut butter. How are we doing? You with me on this? It's not one or the other. This is a good example of what it looks like when you start designing it, because teachers say, hold the phone. What's this going to be? I need all of these designs. So what you're looking at, see where I have a tight design but low autonomy? I need sometimes to just tell students what to do. Is that true? Things like wash your hands. That's not something where I go, well, explore the reasons why you might wash your hands. You know what? Wash your hands. All right? And this is a fraction. But I need to develop the concept of that and the understanding of that. So sometimes I might need them to have high autonomy. They get to pick when they work on it. But I'm still clear about what they're working on. I would call that individualized instruction. I'm controlling the learning targets, but the students control time. They could work on it at home. They could work on it in the classroom. You hear what I'm saying? Pictures, a lot of those things we did during distance learning, where they had videos that they could watch and they could interact with it. That's a really good example of individualized instruction opportunities. But if I have loose design but low autonomy, it's something like this. We are studying leaders in the Civil War. You may pick between, right, Lincoln or Lee to do your work. So what have I done? I'm giving them choice. But is it really a lot of freedom? No. I'm still controlling the pieces. And there might be times to do that. I'm not against that. I just want us to be aware that that's not enough. When I get to high autonomy and loose design, I have now taught the child how to organize their own learning. I have now taught the child how to wrestle with the ideas of communication and what they want to learn about. Have you ever seen like those capstone, cornerstone assessments at a school that isn't doing this yet? And they say, yes, we do a senior project. And then have you ever met the teachers who had to organize those senior projects? Don't you just want to give them a hug? Don't they get the short straw? If a child has been kept in the obey state from pre-K to junior year in high school, and then suddenly we say, we'd like to know what you want to learn about. The kids are like, are you kidding me? They're like, just tell me what you want me to do. How do I get an A? But that's on us. So what I'm proposing is that we use this methodology to actually physically teach kids how to be self-navigating learners. And I'd like to show you how. Is that all right? All right, so here we go. The trick is called a self-navigation tool. Kids are not naturally self-navigating learners. All right, I'll back off of that. Depending on the research, 18 to 20% of your students actually are self-navigating learners, and they come in. You've met them before, right? They come in and they've got these crazy ideas, and you're like, I just love that kid. But the reason that that's such an interesting situation is they're that way despite us. What I'm suggesting is we need to help more of our students achieve those skills, but we actually have to teach them how to do it. So how do you do it? This is how. This is where me being tethered is now an official problem. All right, I'll start over here. The first part of being a self-navigated learner, I know, right? Help me. Figure it out. Well, this is going to be great. Okay, here it is. We call it now the 4 selfies. Okay? So, I have hope. I'm going to start here. The first thing a learner or a brain has to do to be a self-navigating learner is to be able to self-assess. This is the human brain's ability to go, gosh, where am I in my process? What am I good at? What do I need to learn? You hear it? Have you ever seen a child get a grade back in class and they like turn the paper over? Or they throw it away? That's assessment data happening to a child. They're not processing that information. That's when we connect assessment information to status. I expected you to be good at this and you're not. This is a bad, unhealthy place for a human brain to be. But the human brain doesn't mind being told it was wrong. Have you ever seen a kid try and play a video game? The first time they die in the video game, did they just quit forever and stop? No, they immediately go into the next level and they go, don't go through that door. Okay, so the human brain doesn't mind being told it got 50% out of 100. What it minds being told is, you didn't meet my expectations, perhaps you're not good at this, or you didn't try hard enough, or you didn't study. That's connected to status. Okay, so self-assessment is the awareness of, where am I in my process? Self-monitoring, on the other hand, is the ability to self-regulate. And this idea of self-regulation, they are documenting this data. They're keeping it somewhere. They're sorting it. I'm good at these learning targets. I need to practice these learning targets. And I still need to learn these learning targets. Listen to the pronoun. I need to practice these. I need to learn these. Self-direction is looking forward. So self-directing is connected to goal setting. It's the ability to go, so in order to improve my performance, what will I do? Have you ever tried to write goals with kids? Come on, honest. Remember the SMART goals that we were doing in the late 90s? That is so 2010, right? By the way, love SMART goals. SMART goals are good. But if the children aren't taught how to self-assess and how to self-regulate and how to self-direct, for you and I, it's like pulling teeth. I got really good at writing SMART goals for children who were convinced it was their SMART goal. You know what I'm talking about. So this idea becomes, it's not enough to just say I have the SMART goal. I need to create a neurological pathway that is self-aware and then self-regulating and then self-directing. And then last but not least, self-motivation. I want to talk about self-motivation. Oh, by the way, this is last night, Karen Hess was showing us kind of ideas of like portrait of a graduate or portrait of a learner. Okay, so this is an example of those competencies and how we can break it down. Do you see how that's at grade level? So what does self-navigation look like in a K through 2 or in a 3 through 5 or a 6 through 8? We need this to be precise learning targets. This is not, well, I kind of want kids to learn how to be self-assessing. I mean, this is an overt part of our curriculum connected to our proficiency-based practices. If you want your kids to have self or personal responsibility, then I need to break it down like this. If you want your kids to turn stuff in on time, then I need to break it down like this on what it takes to do that. I teach graduate school. I still have students who can't turn stuff in on time. So I don't expect anyone in a K through 12 to hold those babies accountable at that level. Oh wow, too much passion again. I'll back it out. That almost seemed aggressive, didn't it? That was like so New York. I'm going to back that up. Let's go. All right. This is an example of a self-navigation tool. It looks like this in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, and 13th, and 14th, and 15th, and 16th. Everyone with me on this? It's the basics. Notice on this the learning strategies. There are only 16 ways the human brain learns. Don't worry, I'll hand them to you in a second. But here's what I want to talk about: motivation. You don't go from I need to learn this to I'm good at it. Hi kids, I'm going to introduce to you words on Monday, and then I'm going to assess you on them on Friday. You don't go from I need to learn it to I'm suddenly really good at it. In terms of doability, can I say it like that? It goes from I still need to learn this to I need to practice this. And then it goes, I'm talking about self-assessing now, from I need to practice this to I'm good at it. So where in our design are we leaving the room for the kids to do that? Let me say it like this. I want you to picture a project that you do in your classes. Got it? How many of your students would do better on that project if they just followed the directions? So what I'm suggesting is a project that I assign and then grade as a summative, that's an autopsy. You never let them practice it. I'm proposing I design my unit so I assign a project right in the beginning, let the kids do it once, give them the feedback like, you were supposed to have 3 examples. Oh, okay. Then let them do it again. That's evidence of learning. And then the kids who did do really well with it, or even the kids who are like, I actually hated this project, could I do it a different way? You've given them a model. Now they could personalize it. They could make it better. Even better than what you and I designed. Which brings me to motivation. I know everyone in the room was like, hey, you skipped that. No, I didn't. I just had a different slide for it. Everyone with me? This is self-motivation. That's a lottery ticket. It won $17 million. It's actually real. I got a picture of it. Sadly, it was not mine. I want to talk about this a little bit. I mean, no, if I level with you, I really want $17 million. I still have several college educations to pay for. I think $17 million would have a positive impact on my life. But I didn't buy a ticket. Why didn't I buy a ticket? Wanting it doesn't lead to action. I want $17 million. I want good grades. I want to make my parents happy and my teachers proud of me. I want to graduate. I want to get a good job. But wanting something doesn't motivate to action. Wanting something motivates to fantasy. Have you ever imagined what you would do if you won the lottery? That's a really nice fantasy, isn't it? But I didn't buy a ticket. Why didn't I buy a ticket? Because I used to be a high school math teacher. I've done the math. I didn't think it was doable. You tell me I have a 1 in 10 chance to win that, watch how quickly I buy a ticket. I might even go out of my way on the way home to get a ticket. I am seriously motivated to action if I believe it's doable. The human brain, you can tell me you want to give me an A, but what happens is if you tell me, oh, to be an astronaut or a scientist, you need to do a lot of math, so you better practice. The human brain actually goes, there's a whole series of careers that are gone for me. How do I know this? I click clickbait. You know all those stories about the lottery winners? They're like all bankrupt. It ruins their families. It ruins I saved my marriage by not buying that ticket. So look what's happening. In that space, if you and I are trying to actually motivate our students, don't use the carrot and the stick. What you want to do is make your curriculum, those learning targets we're talking about, doable, approachable, accessible. If you do that, you will increase self-motivation. Here's an example. So here's some students, this was in California, and we cooperated with a local EPA organization. Now, Montana, not for nothing, you have huge money in Montana right now doing research on soil quality, air quality, water. Oh my goodness. Just contact them or local universities and have them just work with your students. So these kids came out 3 weekends and a couple of days after school, and they dug holes and they designed the research assignment, collected the data, and then worked side by side with professional scientists on a research project. When we surveyed the kids afterward, you know what we heard? They were like, are you kidding me? Those were scientists? They wore jeans and hoodies and t-shirts and had dirty fingernails. And the math wasn't even that hard. So being a researcher or a scientist became doable. So how much of your curriculum is actually connected to field study experiences? You have to make these things feel doable. Half of those kids thought scientists wore white lab coats and were in weird offices surrounded by hard math problems and weirdly colored water. So these are the learning strategies. Here are the first 8. Learning strategies are different from instructional strategies. Instructional strategies are things teachers do to make learning experiences meaningful and engaging. Learning strategies are things that humans do independently to learn something. So what I'm suggesting is that you take your learning targets and match them with learning strategies for the kids. So the kids can actually learn or practice your curriculum without the teacher reteaching it, without the teacher having to give them all their feedback. This will make a lot more time. And that will allow you to do 3 things. Give honest and transparent feedback to your learners. Have more time so that you can actually do relevant and authentic experiences. And overtly teach your students how to be self-navigating learners. I'll be going into details on all of these pieces in the next session, but I leave you with this idea. Why are we using standards-based grading and reporting, or proficiency-based grading and reporting, or competency-based grading and reporting? Because we're going back to our roots. We're shedding the industrial model, and we are re-embracing how to educate children the most effective way, continual feedback that's honest and transparent, at a diagnosis and prescription, not an autopsy. We are doing it so that we can track how students are doing, and they can track how they're doing, so that we can do relevant and authentic experiences. And by handing the curriculum over to the students and letting them actually improve their own performance, we're helping them be self-assessing, self-regulating, self-directing, and self-motivating. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and your attention. I hope you enjoy the entire conference. Thank you.